Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
Sound good?
Yes, sir! I know who I am!
Did IQs just drop shot?
That could have been.
I have a plan. I like this shit.
You know, it's exciting.
Dance off, bro.
It is your
Me and you.
destiny.
Welcome to the Atlantic Screen Connection Podcast.
Let the games begin.
Hello and welcome to the Atlantic Screen Connection Podcast with Jason and Lee. I'm Jason.
I'm Lee.
And this week, because we are unoriginal fucks, we will be talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Oh, we love jumping in on bandwagons. That Marvel viewership. Nom nom nom.
Exactly. You guys can't get enough of it? We're going to give you some more. We're going to stuff that down their gullet. But before we do that, I want to see how my co-host Lee is doing. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I am excited to talk Marvel because I haven't done it in a while. A whole maybe month or two since Logan came out. We haven't done the central Marvel universe. Yeah, so we haven't done that since Doctor Strange, and I'm always fascinated. I totally love the Wii universe that's been building and building. I always like seeing the next things that are coming out, and I'm a total nerd, so it all kind of always happy to delve into comic books while they're still relevant.
Yeah, this will be fun. Cool. I'm doing okay too. I just got back from a workout. Actually, I needed to get my brain into gear, and for some reason, just going out to the gym actually felt really good. Semester's winding down as well. I have a bunch of grading, but slowly but surely, all of this will be leading into my summer break, which is going to be fantastic. But I want to bring in our special guest for today. He's going to be our go-to gentleman for all the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Say hello to Jason Beaulieu. Hi, Jason.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Definitely, man.
Thank
It's
you.
going to be super
Thank
cool.
you.
Well, last time you were on was for Doctor Strange.
Yes, you are our first returning guest.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Thanks.
right.
You beat out Carrie by like a single episode.
Cool. So how you doing, Jason?
I am great. Well, I see Jason almost every day because we're office mates, and we saw Guardians together this weekend. It was awesome.
Cool. Excellent. So you excited to talk about Guardians,
Yes.
Jason?
I am because I guess I'm in charge a bit about the music part of it.
Good, because that's something I didn't do any fucking talking points on at all, so that'll be good.
Neither did I. I didn't do anything on that. Awesome.
So yeah, I'd be glad to talk about that.
Cool. So before we get into it, I want to, Jason, where can we find you online, man? Just so that people can go give you a follow as they're listening to this, because you one sexy man.
Oh, stop it. I am at J Beaulieu at Twitter. That's JAYBEAULIEU.
Cool.
So check me out.
Before we get into it, before I play the trailer, as per usual, we go into spoilers quite a bit. So,
Yep.
If you guys haven't seen the film and you don't want anything spoiled, tune out now and come back and listen later if you feel like it. Obviously, we're not going to hold you to it, so don't tweet at us or anything like that.
I'm gonna hold them to it.
You're gonna hold them to it?
If I see somebody who's like, yeah, you know what, I'm not watching this for spoilers. I'm gonna check up on you in like a month, and I'm gonna ask like, hey,
Nice.
remember the episode you said you couldn't watch or listen to?
So that's it. This is your warning before we actually get into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Spoilers abound, because Atlantic Screen Connection does not give a shit.
No, yeah, we're not a review show. We are a discussion show.
Exactly. We don't care. We're going to spoil everything for you because we want to talk about the film from beginning to end. So that's it. Stay tuned.
I'm Colin Llewellyn,
I'm Judson Grant.
and we're the hosts of Another Film Podcast.
Another film podcast?
That's right, Another Film Podcast.
On this show, every couple weeks, we analyze a classic and a contemporary film, analyze the cinematic DNA they share.
That's right. For example, we talked about 2001: A Space Odyssey, Interstellar, and Arrival.
And we also had an episode on Star Wars and the influence of Akira Kurosawa.
And if you're into more spooky things, we talked about The Shining and The Witch.
Oh, such a good episode.
We were like on point.
Check out that one, everyone. That's our best episode.
Yeah. Check us out. We are Another Film Podcast, found on social media under Another Film Pod and on SoundCloud and iTunes.
Hi, everyone. This is Tim Costa.
I'm Hermano da Silva.
And this is Walter Vinci.
And together we are the First Time Watchers Podcast.
Each week we choose a movie to review that none of us has seen.
watch it together,
and then discuss.
These movies could be new.
Or old.
Or on our list of shame.
You can find us on iTunes by searching for the First Time Watchers Podcast.
As well as on Stitcher.
And we love interacting with our listeners, so if you have any suggestions, send us a tweet.
An email.
Or post to our Facebook page.
We'd love to hear from you.
That's right. I mean, it's all about interaction.
And talk about what we love. Movies.
And you don't have to worry about us going on and on about this and that and the other. And let's talk about this minutiae here. Shut up.
And
I wonder who the cat can
God damn it, shut up.
I think that's enough,
Hope you're ready. It'll be here any minute. Is that a rifle?
You don't know what a rifle looks like?
It's just swords were your thing and guns were mine. But I guess we're both doing guns now. I just didn't know that.
Well, that's intense.
I see it within you. Fear, jealousy, betrayal. It is our duty to cleanse the universe of this weakness.
You know, they told me you people were conceited douchebags, but that isn't true at all. Dude! I'm using my wrong eye.
Groot, put your seatbelt on! So we're saving the galaxy again?
Yep.
Awesome! We're really gonna be able to jack up our price if we're two-time galaxy savers.
Yes!
Sometimes the thing you're searching for your whole life is right there by your side all along.
You're right.
All you do is yell at each other. You're not friends.
No, we're family. Except maybe her. After all these years, I've found you.
And who the hell are you?
Hey, Sheila.
I'm your dad, Peter.
Welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed the trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, a film that is directed by James Gunn, stars Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, the voice of Rocket Raccoon. I don't know if is Vin Diesel voicing Baby Groot?
Yeah, it was voice modulated, but yeah, it was him. He also got a little more hands-on in this one too. He showed up on set for once. He wasn't there last time.
No shit, really?
Nice.
Yeah, it was all audio. It was all in the fucking booth last time. This time he was there, crawling around.
Oh, Kurt Russell's in this, man, and he's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
Michael Rooker as well.
Michael Rooker, brilliant also. And Karen Gillan, who plays Nebula, she's in this as well. She's really cool.
It's a big cast.
It is a big cast, you're absolutely right. And so that's it. So the plot of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is quite simple. There is none.
That's the truth of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a film that's driven by character development, and to me, it's all the better for it. But, however, I want to avoid getting callous looks from Lee, so here goes. This is what the plot is. The Sovereign, an alien race that has almost reached optimal existence, hires the Guardians of the Galaxy to defend a large battery depot from a giant space slug. The heroes defeat the slug, but a contemptuous Rocket Raccoon steals some of the batteries from the Sovereign, setting off a chain of events that lead the Guardians to encounter Ego, a space god that claims to be Peter Quill's biological father. Can he be trusted? Pretty much sums it up.
In a nutshell.
So, Let's get into this. Jason.
Yes.
Moving on to you. What did you think of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2?
Well, I really liked it. I really, really liked it, and it's a great addition to the first one. I, unlike yourself, really liked the first one, and I was reluctant about the second one. I'm like, okay, second time, we know about the universe. Is it still going to be as good as the first? So my first impression is it's maybe not as good, but it's equal I would say maybe equal, maybe less, not as good as the first, but still very enjoyable, and I had a great time. And I went with the kids this time, so that was pretty fun. I didn't know what to expect, but they really, really liked it.
Cool. Lee?
Yeah, I loved it. And the thing is, the more I dwell on it, the more affection I gained for it. Where I went into it knowing that I really did enjoy the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and was pretty optimistic that this was going to be, at the very least, enjoyable, if meaningless. And then the more I dwell on it and the more I think about it, the more I just appreciate that this was just a solid work. You know, it's like a real driven story written by somebody who really gave a shit. I feel like it's one of those ones that the more you come back to, the more that everybody comes off the sort of initial impressions high and comes back to it more and more. They'll kind of start to see that they'll find themselves drawn to watching it more often than the original, because there's more to delve into, I think.
I agree.
Very cool.
100%. Yeah.
I'm not in the same boat as you guys. Jason pointed it out. I wasn't a fan of the first film. I got a lot of flack on Twitter for that. And even, like, I don't understand. First film suffered from a poorly drawn out villain. And the dumb MacGuffin that was the Infinity Stone, you know, there was no real character development for me. And I thought that the third act was completely nonsensical. I think that, like, MacGuffins can be fun, but it was also one of the weaknesses that I thought that dragged Civil War down as well. You know, sure. Bucky being the MacGuffin when we talked about the Civil War. This is our third, actually, MCU, Lee.
Oh, yeah. We did to Civil War what we basically did with the Suicide Squad, which was bitch about Twitter more than we actually talked about the film.
Nice.
We have to break Jason on just so that we can stay on topic.
There you go.
Exactly.
And so that's it. I don't have any affection for the first one. I didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't find it funny. I didn't like Chris Pratt. Rocket's jokes to me fell flat. And even when Groot sacrificed himself at the end, I didn't give a shit at all. I didn't care.
Yeah, I agree there. I never got the great weeping of 2014 that apparently followed after that scene, because I had no attachment to that tree.
Exactly. And so I don't know, for some reason I wasn't surprised by it, and I can't explain why. I tried watching it on Friday before going to see the film on Sunday, and I caught myself on my phone because I just couldn't get into it. I didn't care. So I was heading into this one with no expectations. I was bringing the kids just like Jason, and I was surprised at the depth that James Gunn was able to conjure up and convince me with for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I really like this film, and to me, it's easily in the top 3 MCU films, and it might just become my favorite.
Over Winter Soldier, that's all take a moment to chill out.
No, but I mean, Winter Soldier, let's get this one thing straight. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, to me, doesn't even feel like it's part of the MCU.
Yeah, that is.
I agree,
and it's so weird because when you look at if you look at Winter Soldier, if you look at Civil War, those aren't films that can be taken like as one-offs. And you could just put them on. You have to have that backstory in order to really understand every single plot point that they're trying to go to. Case in point, I took my girlfriend to see Civil War, and I mentioned this on the Civil War episode. She didn't understand what the fuck was going on.
Oh, I mean, Civil War is incomprehensible.
But I mean, she didn't care for Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, and she walked out of Volume 2 saying, this was a really good film. And to me, if a film of this caliber, for these misfits anyway, for this group of people to actually convince my girlfriend and go like, this is actually a really good film, I mean, that means it succeeded for me first and foremost as a standalone. Obviously, there are things that pay off from the first film, no problem. But as a standalone film, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 actually works really well for me. And so I loved this movie. Like I said, it's only going to become my favorite because I can take it, watch it on its own, and get payoff without having to rely on the first film. The events in the second film do affect the first film, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I think it's really brave of James Gunn to be like, I'm going to draw out the story, make it my own, and it doesn't really have to do with anything that's going on to the MCU. All it does for me is point us in the direction that if the Guardians of the Galaxy are actually going to be an Infinity War, we actually know them very well now, and if anything happens to one of them, we have actual stakes. That's what I think is cool about Volume 2.
Yeah.
It's a huge risk gamble when it comes to the whole combination thing, because now I care way more about them than I care about any of the other heroes, which is maybe going to be a bad thing as we spend a lot more time with the middling interest of Captain America. And we've basically wore everybody's welcome out with Civil War. And really, Infinity War just it feels like it's going to be like a big showcase spectacle more than it is a character piece. I can't imagine this working out, you know? If it does, I mean, fantastic, but I'd be very surprised.
It'll be interesting. All right, so let's get into it. Jason, talk to us a little bit about the music, dear sir.
Well, the music. Yeah, well, actually, what I'd like to add about the first movie is that the reason why I liked it was because of the music.
Yeah.
It was so unexpected.
Oh, cool.
I didn't know it was that chock full of like 70s pop and like early 80s. I don't even think it's early 80s. It's all 70s.
I don't think it gets there. I think it cuts off at 79 or something.
Yeah, and just a quick mention of like when the movie starts with when Peter Quill is on the planet about to catch the MacGuffin, and then they're playing, he's playing this, Come and Get Your Love, and it's just such a joyous song. He's using it to be able to face his fear. Like he's afraid of the planet, but when he puts his music on, he can just do anything. And that, to me, that I was sold at that point. Yeah. I was like, wow, okay. I was in for the ride. So I just I wasn't expecting the music to be all 70s. That was pretty cool. And he does the same with the second one. I was a little, reluctant in the sense that like, how can you recreate something you did in the first one where the songs are used for specific scenes, and it's obvious that James Gunn used those songs to write scenes, or vice versa. Like the scenes wrote themselves, or the song.
Yeah.
Or like he had a scene and then he thought, okay, this song would fit perfectly with this. So I thought, well, is he going to do it again in the second movie? And he does. He does. And what he does in the second one is he actually he analyzes a song in the movie.
Yeah. That was great. It breaks into the narrative at last, because it is important. In the first one, it does form an atmosphere, but this time we see him actually incorporating it in an interesting way. I think that's great.
Well, when he talks about Brandy, he talks about basically Meredith Quill, how amazing she is and everything, and then he shows his son, the power that he has within him, and then it switches for like the epic battle. It switches to Fleetwood Mac, The Chain. And the interesting thing is, what they're doing is they're going retro, and they're using that as a backdrop for a futuristic movie, or a sci-fi fantasy movie.
Yeah.
A lot of people see this as novel, but it isn't. It was something that was being done in the early 80s, late 70s. I did some research and I found the heavy metal comic book from the early 80s, late 70s. Well, in fact, it started in France in 1974 by comic artist Jean Giraud. And his name was Mobius.
Right.
And it came to the US, and it was probably in the UK as well. And a movie came out in 1981. And in 1981, there was a soundtrack to this movie. And it's very oddly similar to the Guardians of the Galaxy world. That's why I went. Like, my brain went to, well, this is, they used to do that in the early 80s.
Right, yeah.
And, or just think, Queen scoring Flash Gordon. That
or Highlander.
Or Highlander. There you go.
Absolutely,
so it's not.
Right,
it feels novel because it hasn't been done in such a long time, and I think that's thanks to James Gunn.
It evokes. So you're saying it evokes that specific period of science fiction films.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, it's sci-fi fantasy. That's the thing. It's not hardcore sci-fi like, I don't know, say Star Trek, or something more recent like Interstellar or whatever. It's really sci-fi fantasy with, guys in loincloths with laser guns.
Yeah,
what
right.
I mean?
Yeah.
Makes no sense whatsoever, but it looks awesome. And I think that's what he was going for. Yeah.
They're going back to an 80s vibe because, that is in right now. I think the sensibilities that come with the music that Gunn is choosing, even like at the opening of Volume 2, we can see that the film is actually set in when they meet, is it 1980?
1984? 1980?
1988?
It's 1980. Sorry. Guardians 1 is 88. That's when he gets abducted. But we flash back to 8 years prior. That's right.
Right.
So I think it's kind of fun because it would be normal for Quill to have a cassette tape of his mother's songs because that's our first introduction to music itself. But at the same time, this goes back to a time where, this is the only music he actually knows. There's no way he can get any contemporary music. So it'll be interesting because if he finds, now that he has the Zune at the end of Volume 2, that opens up a world of possibilities because that was discontinued in 2007 or 8? So, it's going to have a lot of contemporary music on that. It holds 130 songs, I think.
300. It says 300.
Watch out, Volume 3.
Well,
I like as well that we spend with Quill. When we are already considering that this is a music soundtrack that kind of enforces and sort of contextualizes a lot of the narrative elements of the story. we also see in the narrative itself, with the awesome mix 2 that Quill gets from the end of the first one, much of the time, unlike the first one where it was sort of built into the character, like it was something that had informed him up until that age, this time, much of the time when he's listening to the music, he's studying it. He's sitting down and trying to understand. We see him mostly sit down, put the headphones on, and just listen, you know, and it's more about learning what came next. And it's great that they're using that as a sort of character development tool where we start to slowly see him question the identity that he thought he had in the first one based on the tape that he had originally, and seeing how that moves on further when he's faced with something that doesn't sound really anything like what he was originally listening to. It very much invokes like how we, like, as we grow older and the music changes around us and the pop music changes, how we are forced to continually adapt. And eventually, you know, we had a point where we're kind of knocked off the grid at some point. It's interesting to imagine when it gets to the third one and we got a Zune full of fucking rap and R&B and, you know, and Europop and stuff like that, and then we see Quill just totally disenfranchised with music and the direction the world took. I would love the idea of it. I would love to see something happen about that.
Just imagine Groot getting his hands on that music though, and Quill being pissed off. You turn that shit down.
Exactly.
That's not music.
Pretty cool.
That's how
cool.
the teaser ends, isn't it? He's in his room listening to the Zune player, obviously. So I mean,
with his teenage voice, you know, cracking kind of voice.
So good.
So funny.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing I want to add about the music is that the cassette represents his mom.
Right.
It's the only connection he has to his mother. And every single song, and this is something that James Gunn has mentioned, every song represents his mom. And her music tastes. Therefore, because he lost his mother, then that's the only connection he has. So he uses that to, I guess, communicate. And the fact that he sits down and listens, it's almost like, well, he's listening to his mother's advice, which is good. Yeah. And the volume 2, I guess, is also the mom, but it's
an older
the mother made it. The mother made it, but with her boyfriend in mind, I think.
Yeah.
I think she had Ego in mind, or Jason Quill. His Earth name is Jason. Another Jason, goddammit. Anyway, and
you're totally right. And seeing that reflected in a story in which Peter's now more defined by his need for Gamora, or is trying to understand why, like, trying to understand romance in like in an actual, you know, human way, and not just in a sort of flippant attitude he had in the first film. We're now seeing him sort of really try to settle a little more, and while he's doing that, the soundtrack to that is a more mature version of his mother, who had fallen for somebody. I think the layers, I think people are, this is what I mean about people going back to this film and constantly getting something new from it, because already you're chipping away at layers, even just when you listen to it, that you, if you watch it once, there's a lot of information to take in one go, and it wears pop culture so readily that it's going to seem like there's nothing there.
Right.
But the fact that this is a very finely crafted film, and the fact that we kind of chip away at these layers and we see more and more of these sort of reflections of what the writer intended, we're already seeing that there's way more working under the belt here than it had any right to be.
And you're absolutely right, because like even before we actually wanted to record this, we were actually thinking of going to see it a second time.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
To me, like I this is initial reaction to me, because I feel like that there's just so much more to be gained on a second and third viewing that I was like, fuck, I'm going into this almost blind. I remember feeling it, you know, this is going to be to me, it's going to be more of an emotional reaction to the film, as opposed to a real critic going like, oh, well, this nitpick, that nitpick. I'm not going to be like that. And now that you guys are pointing all this stuff out in the soundtrack, I'm like, yeah, you're right.
So much to do, so much work.
Shit. Now I can go, exactly. Now I have to go back and pick that apart, maybe get the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, get it. Yeah.
You know, and actually like kind of piece together, oh, is this playing at that moment, that's playing at that
I've been
moment.
listening to the soundtrack for 2 days straight. I've been listening to it. Well, for my own
commitment
personal
to the show.
commitment to the show, and then for my own personal pleasure and all that.
Nice.
But I love that he used My Sweet Lord by George Harrison. I love George Harrison.
Right.
And it's so fitting with when Ego presents his planet, you know, or himself, if you will,
yeah.
you know, and it's like this Shangri-La kind of like very Hindu influenced, kind of like trippy
It's
place.
got that incredible narcissism that George Harrison carried with him his entire life.
Well, he was supposed to be like the spiritual one.
The
so,
humble beetle. No
yeah,
such
the
man.
humble beetle. Yeah, exactly. And no, but I mean, in the song, just to use the song again as an example, I mean, they mention all these gods, you know, like Dalai Lama and Hare Krishna and all that stuff. He's on the ego planet, you know. It's like this one true God, kind of this one guy. But this song about all like multiple religions is playing in the background. It creates this kind of paradox, you know, like who is this guy? Like, okay, he's a god, but he's this awesome dude. But you know, I really enjoyed the connection with that song. I was
Cool. Anything else on the lyrics, man? What other songs did you pick apart?
Well, I really liked The Chain, of course. Well, okay, before let me rewind. I'll start with Brandy. Because Brandy is the song that when Peter and Jason are talking in that lounge or whatever, he's just about to show him like, okay, I'm going to show you how powerful you can be. But he does that by seducing him by talking about how awesome his mother was.
Yeah.
Or is. By saying, you know, like, okay, she's a fine girl. She talks about the sailors in the bar or whatever, or the singer from the band. So the band's called Looking Glass. But they're all after this one girl, Brandy, who turns out to be, she symbolizes Meredith. And so he seduces his son by talking about his mom. And I love the fact that he goes, I'm going to create the craziest shit. You know, I'm going to have like statues of Skeletor and all that. Anyway,
That was a Skeletor moment.
Side note.
That was so fucking funny because I saw it in my head. Skeletor is Pac-Man.
So good.
And then once he gets him, he says, well, okay, I found life. I was bored by it, so I've decided that I'm going to get rid of it. And, it's too bad I had to get rid of your mom by giving her a brain tumor. You know, just the look on his face.
That's a fucking weird Freudian slip right there.
Yeah.
I know.
I Confess style. Alfred Hitchcock just slips out and you're like, whoops.
And the final battle with his dad is Fleetwood Mac, The Chain.
Mm.
And I mean, the lyrics to that one are just,
if you don't love me now, you'll never love me again.
Yeah, if you don't love me now, you'll never love me again. I can still hear you saying you will never break the chain. Damn your love, damn your lies. You know,
wow, it's perfect. It
it's
really
all,
is.
And it
super
really
cool.
elevates, and it's like it's fisticuffs, you know, going back and forth.
At the same time, the chain at that point, because it's so much more about the family, you know, it's about the the final chorus of it is the chain, keep us together. That plea, and we see more in that moment a focus on the actual Guardians themselves rather than the connection between Ego and Peter. We see more the continual struggle of all the other members of the team, and then that's the family in this case. So it's great. It worked like they've took the two separated halves of that song, the angry part and the desperation second half, and they've really done a great job melding that into one fluid action scene. It's brilliant.
Soundtrack is sold. I'm gonna go check that out because, but I mean, it's a completely different experience if you guys mention it like that. I mean, I like listening to soundtracks most of the time, and scores especially. I mean, I was walking home from, this is a dumb shit, but anyway, I was walking home from the exercising earlier, and I was walking home to Rogue One, and then I put on Empire Strikes Back, and I mean, this overwhelming feeling comes over me once the Imperial March comes on. I feel like choking people in the street. It's fantastic. But I want also
of course
to kind of be able to listen to this Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 and finally knowing, I know that it's big, but the thing is that I didn't know much of these songs because I grew up listening to my dad's shit, and my dad is Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, you know, Black Sabbath. A lot of that stuff comes from him. So I mean, the songs that are playing in the film are not songs that I was privy to growing up.
Well, they're obscure. Like obviously there's the big bands like Cheap Trick and Fleetwood Mac and all that, but there's a lot of stuff like, you know, Glenn Campbell and Aliota Haynes Jeremiah. Like, who is that? You know, like it was these like they were local hits that James Gunn grew up with, and they would play. They would be played at the local radio stations, and you didn't have the same distribution system as we have today.
I mean, in the UK we barely fucking got the chain. Never mind all that shit.
Well, exactly, and it's but again, it's all about finding those little classic gems, and I believe that it just adds to the naturalness of the movie, that it makes it's retro.
Well, I mean,
but everything feels real. Again, like I did the same thing on Friday. I watched the first one, and Pina Colada song plays when he escapes prison. The song's called Escape. That's an obvious one. But still, he could have used,
Metallica
AC/DC.
Song. That would have been awesome.
Like AC/DC's Jailbreak. But he goes with the tackiest, cheesiest song that was out there, and it's all this MOR crap. But you're like, you know what? Come to think of it, those are well-crafted songs, and it doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be, aggressive.
If you think what was really popular in the 70s, it's not going to be fucking, it's not going to be the actual metal that informs the niche of the next 10 years. It's going to be fucking songs like the Escape the Pina Colada song.
It's where you start,
inheriting
I agree.
The cassette of your teenage mother was not listening to fucking Black Sabbath. No. Mine was, but not this character's.
This is how old I am. I used to have a Mickey Mouse turntable with the big finger that you'd put on the record and whatnot. And the first record I ever got, I'm 41. So the first record she bought me was Blondie, The Tide Is High.
Nice.
She bought that for me, man. And then she bought me Hot Stuff, like Donna Summer. She bought me Kenny Loggins. She bought me
masculine songs for a growing boy.
I know. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. Hey, my dad died. God damn it. No, it's okay.
Oh, man.
But honestly, no. But it was. I get where Peter Quill is coming from.
I think we all do.
Exactly, yeah. I don't necessarily like these songs anymore, but like I have a soft spot for them because it was a gift, Yeah. And that's where Peter kind of like, that's where it touched home. It's like, oh, I have one little negative thing to say about the soundtrack.
Nope, this is all positive. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me put it this way. Like, I get what he was doing, and I understand that James Gunn was having a blast doing this, but like to me, the Guardians Inferno song, the pastiche song that he created with David Hasselhoff and the guy who did the rest of the score, Tyler Bates,
right?
They made like a pastiche song. It sounds like it's halfway through between Meko's Star Wars disco version and all those crappy songs like the novelty songs of the 70s,
filler hits of the day.
Disco Duck and all that stuff,
that shit.
and I felt like I get why he did it, but he used to be a musician. He used to be in a band called the Icons, and when I see things like that, I'm like, you know what? Can you just please keep your day job and just be a director and not don't whip out the guitar. Don't whip out the guitar. We don't want to see you perform music. You know what I mean? Like you're an awesome director, and the song was it was on the nose, just like with Hasselhoff, and it's an annoying song.
In the film, it doesn't bother me at all, but I can imagine if you buy the fucking album, that's not a good way to cap it all off. That's a pretty...
No, exactly. Well, it's in the credits,
skip
it's at the end.
Skip at the very end of the second last
skip
song.
It, yeah, well, and it is at the very end of the movie. So, and thank God for that. It's like, at least he didn't put it in like the final battle scene. Because that would have been...
fuck, okay, yeah.
God, yeah.
Or actually, it would have worked because, the bad guy's ego, so narcissism.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll stick my own vanity project into the film. Like, I thought, I hate that when certain art, like, Billy Bob Thornton goes off and, sings and gets pissed off when you mention he's an actor / director.
Oh yeah, it's like professors in university that get you to read their books instead of other people.
Exactly.
You're like,
That's
this
why,
is what I said. I was like,
specifically
motherfucker.
Because of that person, that kind of person, why I switched from prose to screenwriting. It's those people who are like, yeah, you want to write another book about the Troubles? They're like, go fuck yourself. You know what? Suddenly, I don't want to write another fucking book in my life.
But I get why he did it. Like, at least he did it as a joke. It's a joke. It's not a serious song.
Yeah.
But the song is too cheesy. It's too pastiche.
I feel that people take a lot of pride in their jokes if they keep it in on the fucking album.
Yeah.
Oh man, brilliant. Oh man, that was great stuff for the music part. I mean, I'm looking forward to listening to the soundtrack now with all that information, because I don't know any of this shit. You know what I mean? To me, this is music that I like I said, I wasn't privy to. But anyway, so that was awesome, man. Lee, you were talking to me just before we actually started recording, and you had you read an essay on empathy.
Yeah.
Which I think it ties into Mantis quite well. So that's going to be really
exactly.
interesting.
I'm going to bring that up. I'm going to say, so it's fun that James Gunn has his fingers in all the pies here.
Really cool.
Crafting the film. I wanted to look at what made Guardians of the Galaxy so engaging. And as I went on my sort of exploration of different topics that I was reading up on, I found a really interesting piece that sort of ticked all the right boxes for me, and it was an exploration of empathy and how that sort of both reflects in the screenplay that Gunn creates, and also works as a sort of allusion to the underpinnings of cinema as a medium. So it's really interesting, and I'm going to keep it as brief as I humanly possibly can, because it's not a very long essay, but it is dense. So the undercurrent of Volume 2 is how empathy exposes our true nature, and we can see that as you said, Jason, with Mantis is quite clearly, she exposes Peter and Drax's driving emotions. Yeah. But also, we see it in the character sort of payoff moments where we get Yondu's confidence in Rocket, Peter's aggression towards Ego, Baby Groot's rage against the abuser of the Marauders, Nebula's admission to Gamora. There's a lot of emotional outpourings in this film. Emotional trauma.
There is.
It's emotional trauma, and it follows mostly that internal harboring of trauma that leads to these outbursts. And it's great that we have this gang of misanthropes to sort of explore, because it really does, as a collective whole, shine. The sort of buzzword to me was empathy. And more than empathy, because we get so involved, we actually slip into sympathy. And when you think about that, about the fact that these are not real people, this is a fictional story, there has to be something. I mean, it's not something that's totally unique to Guardians of the Galaxy. We often sympathize with characters, but the fact that fiction can make us do that, and film as a medium can make us do that, it was fascinating to me. And I found a great little article. It's from a book called Narration and Spectatorship in Moving Images, and the section in question is called Empathy and the Episodic Structure of Engagement in Fiction Film. And I'm totally going to mess up this name. It's Margaret Brune-Vage, hopefully. And so in it, Vage discusses how film prompts imagination on the part of the viewer. And so I've got a quote. First and foremost, the fiction film prompts the spectator to imagine internal engagement in fiction film, is thus to imagine what you see on the screen to be true. To engage in the diegetic world of the film is to imagine its characters and events to be true. So, essentially, she goes on to describe how there are two forms of imagination on the part of the viewer, and both of them are involved diegetic. We embrace it as if it were realistic. So, the two forms of imagination are acentral and central. Acentral amounts to imagining the world's rules and how they apply to the character, and so has a sort of inherent distance in it, where you're sort of seeing rules apply, but you're not a part of it. Central entails imagining yourself in the world and how the world rules apply to you when you place yourself within the world. And so it's argued that empathy is not distinctly related to either perspective, and in fact can be captured by both. And you can imagine what a character feels like by placing yourself in their shoes centrally, but you can also see it from a less personal angle and appreciate their triumphs without imagining this happening to, it's explicitly to you. And while this doesn't define empathy entirely, and while both have different definitions and relations to empathy, the idea is that because fiction film requires imagination to follow, it therefore evokes, or at least gives prime opportunity to evoke empathy in order to follow. So, now imagine that the film is so engrossing and engaging that your own responses to the world are characterized beyond that of empathy and are now, as I was saying, sympathetic. We go a step beyond. She labels it out. Empathy, and this is a quote she takes elsewhere. I don't have the person who quoted it. She quoted it from. But empathy is the ability to recognize someone else's pain. Sympathy is the impulse to do something about it. So we've all sided with a character enough to think maybe in our head, we kind of mutter, come on. Or have we told a character to run in horror to fucking get out of there? Or begged the character to be reasonable? Or swore under your breath? I mean, empathy shows you understand the goal of the character, and these reactions can show you actively attempting to push a character towards that goal. And when you get to that point, you slip sometimes into sympathy. Right. And what ties that to film is concepts like suspense and prediction. These sort of dynamic things that we all experience when watching a film, the things that we feel draw us in, are all sort of based on the fact that, you know, we have to understand a general logic, therefore we are empathizing with them. And when it comes to characters, when we see what they want, we are empathizing with the idea that they have wants when they don't. They're not real. And that's concluded in this quote. It says, It is reasonable to conclude that empathy is of major importance to creating suspense and contributing to successful fictional engagement. And without empathy, the spectator would not be able to form expectations and predictions about the behavior and emotional reactions of character, and in turn the fiction film will be experienced as less suspenseful and enjoyable. So we actually, diminishing returns essentially. We can't connect, we don't connect. It's simply put. So, compounding this in the understanding that empathy can help us engage aesthetically with a world, say, for example, that we appreciate that that this is actually the work of a creative in the case, say, Guardians of the Galaxy, that we look at James Gunn's work here and the world created for us to explore. That's an aesthetic appreciation, and it's more of an aesthetic empathy than it is a emotional or physical empathy. So we do this all the time. We do this all the time in the show, even. It's a central premise. We break apart films and see what makes them tick for our wonder and enjoyment. And the greater the spectacle, be it visual or the inner workings of the piece, the more likely we are to empathize with its contents, both internal and external. And so this can turn to self-reflection. Right. I've got a quote for that as well. When engaging empathetically, the spectator may sometimes start to wonder how he himself would have reacted emotionally. Thus, empathy with the character may lead to a different imaginative project where the focus is on the spectator. Empathy may turn to in his shoes imagining. So we're starting to see this sort of draw more onto the spectator when initially empathy is more about basing ourselves on the other. It kind of becomes reflective at a sense, where we start to see ourselves and what we can improve by and through empathy. So the conclusion of the work, and I've got a last quote, empathy may contribute to making the engagement in fictional film a dynamic experience, where fictional, aesthetic, and real-life reflections intertwine in an episodic engagement structure. Empathy stitches together internal engagement in the fictional world, external reflection and appreciation of this. Empathy is a dynamic phenomenon, in its essence making the perceiving subject move between different positions, and thus it contributes to making the fiction film experience dynamic. So that's the rough rule of empathy, and that's me expounding as narrowly as I can on the essay itself. If we look at the character engagements of Guardians of the Galaxy, we can see the events unfold and also imagine ourselves in their place. We are given the chance to trade places with Yondu and Rocket as they trade places with themselves. We see a parent's perspective in Rocket and Groot and Ego. We see Yondu and Peter as well in a sort of surrogacy father-son relationship. Yeah. And we see a child's perspective in Mantis, Nebula, Gamora, and Groot with his family. And we can reflect on ourselves in any of these scenarios because we all, in some shape or another, come from a family. And with Spectacle, countless worlds to explore, narrative devices that keep everything flowing swiftly into each other, and an expansive universe to lose ourselves in, with a diverse roster to pick favorites and sides, yet a focused story on family and division, the screenplay makes it all look simple, tying these themes together to look small despite the large scale. And here James Gunn isn't just tugging on the strings of a typical family tribulation story, but quietly he's poking away at the material that embodies all cinema. So we've got, you can look at your Fincher suspense, your Nolan's logic-ruled worlds, your Kubrickian battles for humanity, your Disney wholesale family values and romantic ideals, and you go lower to your Fate of the Furiouses and your Rockies and your Robocops, you lower still to your Twilights and your Avatar, and the uniting fabric is always empathy. By framing a story around this trait, on the revelations we can obtain once we act clearly on empathizing with others and our own situation, from there we attempting self-reflection and sympathy, Gunn is collectively telling us a story that reminds us of all other stories, as well as imparting on us the importance of empathy as a defining human trait that grants us the potential to truly create, change, and reflect. That focus in of itself is fascinating because it's very simple, it's very broad, but the way that he uses it throughout the story from start to finish just pokes away at the fabric of all film. And I think that is probably what makes Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, when you break it down to its most symbolic or its most mathematic, it's just the sheer use of empathy to draw each and every element to somewhat become some self-reflective on itself, and then on the spectator, then back on the film, then to all film, and so on in a never-ending Mobius strip.
That's really, really cool. Well, while you were saying that, I actually grabbed a book of a film studies book, and I was thinking of something. This is Patrick Phillips who wrote this, and it's about the fact that what appears natural and common sense is rooted in a set of hegemonic choices and constructions.
Wow.
Which is basically, it's a set of ideas and attitudes or practices that become so dominant that we kind of forget that they're rooted in choice.
That's brilliant.
And it's the exercise of power. Yeah, they appear to be common sense because they're so ingrained. Any alternative seems odd or potentially threatening by comparison. Hegemony is the ideological made invisible. So he's obviously... He wants to put forth this idea of family, definitely, because it's all about relationships in this movie.
Absolutely.
And one thing we haven't mentioned yet is the sibling rivalry between Nebula and Gamora. I mean, that's a big deal in the movie. And I was impressed that they developed that, because I thought she was just back to come and kill her sister. But they really went deep.
Definitely.
Like the relationship between the two.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that each and every element was developed in a way to get us to care more and more for each character.
Yeah.
Nobody is left behind, and I think that's a fascinating and very difficult thing to balance in storytelling, that you can have such a diverse team all have a major part.
I'd say it's the first Marvel movie that is able to do that with every single character.
Yeah, I like what both of you guys are saying, because that's exactly, like, the whole empathy route is exactly how I felt about the film. I don't have a hot take on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 because I was sat there as a person just experiencing this film, and I went in trying to pick it apart, and I couldn't through my first watch, because, you know, as I said many times before, I like it when a film makes me think.
Yeah.
And I think that as much as there is plenty to distract the common viewer in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I felt like James Gunn made a film that reminds me of Pixar's The Incredibles.
Yeah,
where,
that's a great one, actually.
Family dynamic is a difficult entity to maintain when all the people are each wrestling with their own individual identity. And I'm going to get a little personal here, because the reason I really, really love the film is because every one of the characters reflect something that I've been through in my life. Like Lee was saying, you know, once you start empathizing with these people, you get attached. And I mean, obviously none of the shit that I went through happened in space, but I mean, in terms of like psychology, or psychologically, I should say, and emotionally, I know what it's like to be Rocket, because I grew up in a place where you'd get your ass kicked just because you were different. I mean, he's a raccoon, but I was born as an English-speaking guy in the province of Quebec. And, you know, even going to school as a young kid, I was supposed to be surrounded by people that, you know, were like me, but I wasn't. I was always the outsider. And even when I went home after school, when I was trying to play with the French kids, they'd kick my ass. So there was no real way for me to actually have friends growing up. So always feeling like an outsider has always been something that's been very, very strange for me to deal with. Even, I mean, like if I decide to travel, you know, I go to Ontario, if I decide to go somewhere like in the Maritimes, I'm always seen as the Quebec guy, but in Quebec, I'm always seen as the English guy. So there's never really a place for me to call home. And so I understand Rocket's psychology and where he's mixed up in terms of not even wanting to identify himself as a person. He's always picking fights. He's always trying to feel a little bit like he shouldn't deal with his demons. So I've been through that. I understand what that is. I also know what it's like to be like Gamora, because I do have a sister and I don't really talk to her much because we rarely see eye to eye. We're very, very different individuals. I love her. I love her very much. And I'm hoping that with time, with age and stuff like that, we will be able to settle our differences because she's a person that I admire very much. It's just that whenever we get into conversation, it usually leads to maybe not the epic proportions that Nebula and Gamora go through, but it usually ends in very much disagreeing on everything.
Yeah, I mean, when you get to your action comic book movie, it obviously it works a lot in symbolism on that level. So
exactly, and I mean, like I said, I mean, to me, I know what it's like to be Drax. You know, to constantly be trying to hold on despite feeling guilty for something that beyond your control. You know, something that you can't or couldn't prevent. And
I agree.
I also know what it's like to be Peter. You know, to let your ego get the better of you when what you've always needed was right there by your side. Now, all of these people are parents to baby Groot, and I know what it's like to have kids and not know who the fuck I am. You know, I had my first daughter when I was 25, and I was a waiter. I had no education. All I knew at that point in time was that I was angry, and I didn't love my girlfriend, but I loved films. I mean, how am I supposed to raise a kid with that little information? I've become responsible for someone. And so I feel like building an identity and finding out who you are can be this painful fucking experience. And you fuck up so many goddamn times before you think you finally got it right, only to realize that you haven't yet. And so what I gain now, like as like a 37-year-old guy with 2 kids, what I gained from my girlfriend or what I gained from my sister, the limited time that we actually spent together, what I gained from my parents is all on screen in Guardians Volume 2. And the fun thing about that is all these people in my life enable me to become Mary Poppins to my kids. And so that's why I really dug the film, because like with what Lee was saying in terms of empathy, it's really all there. I mean, it's probably me maybe reaching too much and trying to find something, but I very seldom feel that kind of experience when I'm watching a film. I mean, I did react to Midnight Special because I could identify with how Alton was dealing with things. But this one was so strange for me, walking out and going like, fuck, how the hell am I supposed to finish off the day now with all this shit going on in my mind? You know, and so that was me. You know what I mean? I think the reason why I said earlier that might become my favorite film is because I see myself in it.
Do you remember when I mentioned when I was the guest for Doctor Strange?
Yeah.
Remember when I mentioned that Tilda Swinton's character, when she decides to let go, I went straight to my mother's experience with cancer. I mean, and with something like Guardians, I lost my father when I was very young, and it's like I could see all these father images and like the positive aspect of it, the negative aspect of it, and then you think of yourself, you're like, yeah, I mean, I would have loved to play catch with my dad a little longer, you know, like I think it hits home in different ways for different people, and that's how it should be, how a good movie should be.
Perfect.
And that's what I thought was cool.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's where it hit me. And I mean, it's very rare that I can feel something like, well, I do feel emotions. I'm not a robot, for fuck's sake. But I mean, like, I never really have visceral
I
experiences.
haven't seen him cry yet, though. I'm still waiting for that. He hasn't cried in The Office yet.
No, but I'm not going to do that.
He almost teared up talking about 13th once. I mean, we were getting there.
that was not, that was
Nice.
a really weird experience, but and a very good one. But at the same time, like, I could feel myself tearing up during Guardians of the Galaxy, and I understand that. I mean, sometimes some people might think that it's overly like melodramatic and whatnot, but to me, it wasn't that. I think that this is a film, and it's what's interesting to me is that I don't feel, yes, family is at the root of what Gunn is talking about, but I really feel that it's talking more about identity. You know,
totally,
the dysfunction
totally.
and chaos at the heart of the Guardians characters, you know?
It does, the fact that it takes time to not just look at the unit, but each and every individual makeup of that family means it is individual within a unit, you know? So identity, both group-wise and solo, I mean, that's essentially the connecting thread between them. It's brilliant.
Yeah. And I mean, what I think is extraordinary in these circumstances is that I can actually take my kids to see this, and they watch it at such a young age, and they'll get something from it. They'll watch it in their teens. They'll get something else out of it. And then they'll watch it as an adult.
Totally.
And it's one of those films that's going to play differently for every generation. And
absolutely,
that's rare. that is now very rare, especially in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that mostly
which nobody is expecting.
Exactly, but I mean, most of it is drenched in politics. Most of it is drenched in politics,
I agree.
and they act as a unit with a political agenda most of the time. Yes, they're saving the world, but that's drenched in 9/11. James Gunn has taken that away, and he's made a real family film.
Yeah, it's a real human film.
Yeah.
You know, and so, I mean, this might be the most Disney entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but fucking Christ, I applaud him for that. I think that's really, really good.
And don't forget, it's an epic sci-fi fantasy. So obviously, you said it would be corny to talk about it emotionally. I don't think so, because it is a sci-fi fantasy movie. Therefore, it is intense. The action sequences are intense. The comedy is ridiculous, and so are the emotions. And that's okay.
Oh, it definitely reaches, pans out for a large audience with all the factors going into the actual presentation of the story, which is great. I mean, it's unfortunate that a lot of critics are kind of upset about the sentimentality. To me, sentimentality is only knowing that an emotion has been covered before, but that's very much based on subjectivity and your exposure personally to certain morals. So yes, if you've watched a lot of Disney films and you see a film about fucking family coming together through adversity, and them being a fragmented, sorry bunch, I'm sure you've seen that fucking somewhere. But does that mean, does that rule out the fact that it has its place, that it to someone else isn't going to be the first experience of that this isn't going to be something that's immediately going to catch a lot of people off guard? People, they can't see beyond where they are at that moment in time. I mean, it's interesting to see that, yes, it has an emotional response in Jason. You've taken it very personally, a lot of the messages in it, but at the same time, you see where it comes from an objective standpoint, where, you know, where it's going to affect generations of people as a collective.
Yeah.
That is far more important, because that's who it's for. It's not for, I mean, if you don't need to learn anything, if you have a sibling and all your siblings get on well together and you're never going to fall out for your entire lives, first, incredible, good job for you. And second, okay, the film's not for you. But does that mean it has less value? It has less importance? Not even slightly. It just means that it doesn't tick all the boxes for you at that moment. But someday maybe it will. And not being open to that, not seeing how universal those themes are, that I feel is very short-sighted of critics.
Yeah, it's well said.
I think that vision of like the perfect family, or the trying to attain perfection, is embodied in that race of gold people. You know, they're trying to attain perfection, but they're very flawed. They're extremely flawed. You know, there's nothing perfect about them.
Everyone has their perfect place, and they're all created perfectly for this one unit, and they are easily they're the villains of the narrative. And I mean, I guess yes, maybe that's a little on the nose, but it's a very open thematic piece, very easy to interpret because it has to appeal universally. I don't think that's a problem. I think that's just, it's hard to do that and still be engaging in as many levels as this film is. So I totally applaud it for being able to carry that fine balance.
All right, cool, good. Well, I just want to move into favorite part of the film. Just quickly, I'm going to chime in. I'll just list these things. I liked how the opening action set piece is a cool metaphor for the entire film. I think that the giant monster that the Guardians have to fight is said to have thick skin, and the only way to defeat it is by attacking its one weakness. It's a scar under its neck. And I mean, the scar has always been a wonderful metaphor for, like, you know, psychological trauma, or, you know, some weird damage that a person has, or some, you know, experience that an individual has. So I mean, to have that embody every single one of the characters, I think that it is really, really cool, because if you look at the idiomatic expression, the beast is said to have thick skin as well.
Yeah.
I think that someone who has thick skin is someone who's supposed to be, like, you know, he's not necessarily affected.
Resilient.
I mean, he's not affected by criticism. You know, he's someone who's insensitive, you know, and someone who's simply beyond giving a shit about what others think, you know. And so I think that the scar itself, you know, is what brings this crew together. They're all damaged. I think that the scar itself is essentially what makes them alike. So, I mean, I read a lot of blurbs that said that the film was about how Peter meets his father. And I was like, that's very short-sighted as a way to explain it. Because to me, the film is about identity. It's about where you fit in. It's about getting older and not repeating the patterns your parents raised you with. It's about protecting your children from potential harm. And it's about, most of all anyway, how most of us misinterpret our parents' actions and only later find out that what they did give us is the best of who they are. Which brings me to my favorite line in the film, which is, not surprisingly, I'm Mary Poppins, y'all. It's
so good.
Because, I mean,
that was funny.
Mary Poppins, if you look at the film, with Julie Andrews from 1964, and if you look at the books that Travers wrote, I mean, Mary Poppins shows up when she's needed at the height of chaos in a person's life. And I think that's interesting because Yondu shows up right after Peter's mother dies in the first film.
Yeah.
And to have Peter's arc come, finish in the second film with Yondu saying, I'm Mary Poppins, y'all, and then you see Peter looking up at him in admiration after realizing this motherfucker was there for me the whole time, is essentially what all children feel for their parents. Their parents are always going to be there no matter what. My father said to me once, kids always remember the negative shit, but then when you're sitting down and having a drink with them later and you mention, do you remember this? And it starts all flooding back, you realize that he was there for all the successes as well. And that's amazing to me, how Gunn was able to bring that arc.
Yeah, incorporate that.
Exactly. And it changes the entire beginning of the first Guardians film, because it shows that Yondu was there to save him and not abduct him. And I thought that was brilliant. So, I mean, the Mary Poppins line
that's great.
Is beautiful because it's not just a funny fucking line. It's an important line that shapes a narrative.
Well, second to I'm not your dad. I may not be your dad, but I'm certainly your daddy.
Some people are taking offense to that. They said it was a shitty line, but I disagree. I think it's a really
perfectly in character.
I totally understood it.
You're right. It's perfectly in character.
I picked up immediately on it.
That's it. So anyway, my standouts for the film. Anyway, the way that I'm taking away from it, Yondu is fantastic, but my personal affection is Rocket. Rocket in this film he has the most important arc, in my opinion, where he goes from being this very insecure individual who even at the end is still wrestling with that insecurity, but knows what it is.
Just what I was going to say, the ending for Rocket's story in this isn't an ending. It's very ambiguous. It's very much a work in progress as far as he's trying to still combat all the things that make him who he is. And now he's got more things to think about, but it's not a resolution. Yeah. And I love that sad, long look that closes the film. Yeah. That's the note we end on. Not a lot of this film, I would say, is particularly arty. There's not a lot of it's not a particularly risky film. It's almost it's a finely crafted film, but I wouldn't say it veers into, ambiguity often. But that ending is one of those steps, and you have to applaud the guy who just thinks, you know what, let's go to close this kid's film. The sad tear in the eye of the raccoon as he tries to contemplate his own existence. You're just going, what the fuck?
That's what's brilliant, and that's what affected me the most, because Rocket is a father to Groot, and he's still figuring shit out himself.
Yeah, he doesn't have his self pieced together. I mean, how more real could it be?
Exactly. And so that's why I identified with Rocket at this point, where I was like, awesome. Jesus Christ, this is exactly what I was living through when I was 25 and 27 when I had my second daughter. And I'm still figuring shit out right now, 10 years later. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Here's the answer. Here's the solution. You never will figure it out.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
There you go.
That's why it's a perfect
just accept
ending.
it. Just accept
it. But to put it on screen and say, deal with it. You are the Guardians of the Galaxy. It made me feel like I was part of the family. And if that's the basic message of this film, man, it succeeds on all levels for me. And I'm not even looking at it in terms of script or how plot or anything like that. I'm looking at it purely as character development.
As a work of intention.
Exactly. There's a lot going on that a lot of people can identify with, that I know that kids are going to revisit, like I said, and they're going to be like, holy shit, this was what the movie was about? And you're like, yeah, wait 10 years and watch it again.
Exactly.
That's great. Hey, yeah, so my favorite was basically, it's a very simple scene that I guess not many people caught on, but that I enjoyed because I spent my youth, I'm pretty much, I guess, like James Gunn or Peter Quill. I spent my youth in arcades.
Oh, nice.
And I really liked the video game arcades. But hang on, the one scene that I freaking loved is when the Sovereign go after Peter Quill's ship when they realize that they've stolen the batteries, right?
Yeah.
And at the very end, there's this one fighter, this one Sovereign fighter
Oh
left.
my god, I know what
He's on the machine, right?
Yeah.
And you have this scene,
the whole crowd around
the camera from above, and it just brought me back to that arcade moment where, you know, you had that one cool kid that would always, you know, kick ass at those video games, and there was these so people would huddle around the arcade game, and they would watch the guy and root him on and like go. And it's straight from that 80s experience of going to the arcade. And it just, it made me smile.
Even,
I was just
even right down to the fact that when he loses.
He loses, and everyone's like, oh.
And everybody's just like, you're a fucking asshole.
Yeah, you suck, yeah. And that is exactly how people used to react. Like you'd be awesome 1 second, then you'd lose. You're like, fucking loser, you know. And just that, to me, I loved it. It was great.
It points to Peter's arc end at the end, you know, when I was talking about identity. The fact that he transforms into Pac-Man. You know, he's decided that he's not going to be a god. He's going to be the weird fucker that he is. And he just transforms into Pac-Man, which was fucking stellar. It was a great idea.
It was stellar. Yeah, it was awesome. It was an awesome scene.
It's like the geek embracing, like, this is me. I'm a fucking weirdo, and I love it. And you hear the just clack, 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 clack of the Pac-Man just going.
Yeah, you hear the clack, clack, clack. Yeah, that's so funny. But does Quill lose his powers?
Yes.
When he kills him?
Yeah, the planet's destroyed. Yeah, he lost them.
Okay, I thought that was a shame.
Yeah, he says it himself. He says you're going to be just like them, and he says, what's so wrong with that? You
exactly.
know,
man, it is a funny film. I mean, you can look at everything twice. Once it's a pop culture reference. Second time, it's a meaningful character insight, and that's what I loved about it. But just the duality that everything has a meaning. You know, this is very much a screenplay written by someone with intention. Who even when you said about the monster at the start, Jason, I imagine he wrote it down on the page. The culmination of all the characters' insecurities approaches and to eat the batteries. You know, like it's just that sort of meta stuff. But at the same time, it's not important really as an entertaining film. It plays itself well and holds itself as an entertaining piece, even if it doesn't have a plot and things that we typically consider are important to these kind of narratives. It does its job more than admirably, and I just loved it for that. And I don't feel I have to go into specifics too much. We could just burn on.
All of us could keep going. I would have liked to talk about the Sovereign or any, you know, a bunch of stuff that I thought were really, really cool. You know, maybe this one will be a movie that I'd like to revisit just before Volume 3 comes out. That would be really, really fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So anyway, shall we close this out, sir?
Let's do it, man.
All right, Jason, I want to thank you so much for coming on again. That fucking music stuff. I have to drive out right now to a supper. I'm invited over, and I'm going to get the soundtrack, and I'm going to listen to it on the way there. It's going to be super cool. Yep. I can't wait to understand these. I'm probably going to have flashes of the images. So, Jason, thank you so much, man, for bringing all that fucking knowledge with you. It was great to have you on again, and we're going to be getting to...
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So
always great to have you. Another fantastic guest twice in a row. That's a mantle not yet held by anyone else.
Thank you so much.
So tell us again where we can find you online, dear sir.
Okay, Jay Beaulieu at Twitter, so JAYBEAULIEU, or just look me up through Jason or Lee's friends and then connect with me that way. You know, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Had a great time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. So,
great.
Lee, where can we find you, sir?
Yep, you can find me at Big Pick Reviews on Twitter and at my website, bigpicturereviews.co.uk. It's me and the humble masses all giving our opinions on films. Actually, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, you can read up my review there. It was one I really enjoyed writing. It's very short, but it's very much a summary of a lot of the ways I felt about the film. And there's also some Lawrence and Aisling also contributed their opinions there. You can see some alternative takes and absolutely knock yourselves out with that. Or contact me on Twitter if you like me ranting about empathy.
That's brilliant, man. They better like it.
Yeah, fucking right. But yes, absolutely. Give me a follow, and obviously, hopefully we'll pick this up again at another point. Marvel films, we chip away at them on Twitter as long as we do on the fucking show itself. These are things we always talk about. It's very popular. So we'll continue the discussion there. Meet us there. Tell us that you hate us.
Cool. And my name is Jason Michael. You can find me at AtlanticSC on Twitter. Go give our Facebook page a like. We're trying to post regularly on that, but I mean, most of the stuff goes on Twitter. Oh, we have 2 more shows coming out after this. We're going to have an AtlanticSC next and an Alien Covenant, so be on the lookout for that. Want to give a big shout out to Sarah Bent again, Mike from War Machine vs. Warhorse, David Hart from Pop Culture Case Study, JD Duran, thank you so much for being a fun guy, I guess. That's the way to put it. Had a fun time. Brendan as well from In Session. Big shout out to Colin Llewellyn from Another Film Podcast. That's it for us this week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning into AtlanticSC Next with Chelsea. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We've been getting some pretty good feedback from that too, so that's really, really fun.
Absolutely.
And please, go see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Treat yourselves to something that is more than meets the eye. That's not a Transformers reference. That's just fun.
Yep, not doing that episode.
That's it for us this week. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.